just they are like in a way good actors. They need to make their opponents believe that everything is under control, they're calm and focused, but in fact they might not be this still.
I was going to say, if someone is betraying some nerves, just by my very amateurist body language reading, I'm just going to say that Jun looks like she's somewhat nervous. Of course, she is an experienced match veteran. She played Tang Zhongyi in 2018, the Women's World Championship title she won. She also defeated Alexandra Goryachkina in 2020. But here, we see her in a completely different situation, because in those previous matches, Ju had always won a game up to game 4. She defeated Tang Zhongyi in game 2. For Alexandra Goryachkina, it was in game 4 where she made the breakthrough. And here, there's a big deadlock on the board. Neither player giving it an inch. And handshake. And we're going to see the first move of game 5.
E4.
And you are right. The temptation is just as strong. You want to put away the Berlin once and for all.
Right. Well, there are other openings except the Ruy Lopez. We might still see some kind of Italian, but for the moment it's knight f3, knight c6. Jun continues with the Berlin defense.
Maybe.
She's 2.
So here could be the point of variation. For instance,
Bishop c4. Okay.
Bishop c4. Okay.
The Italian.
So Lei Tingjie has had enough of the Ruy Lopez, the Berlin defense, and it is the Italian. And now the ball is in Ju Wenjun's court. Is she going to develop the knight and allow the front lever and knight f6?
Well, it might be still transpositioning to the Italian later on. It depends on White's answer. Of course, White has this possibility to play knight g5 and dive directly into those complications, including possibility of the fried liver attacks that you mentioned. But there are other moves, such as quiet d3, which usually after bishop c5 still transposes to the quiet Italian. And of course, I'm very happy to see a new opening on the board. I do play it quite often with the white pieces, so I'm looking forward to seeing what Lei and her team prepared for this event. Now she's looking at the ceiling, probably trying, to remind us of Beth Harmon and Queen's Gambit. Nowadays, people not so close to chess, they always expect chess players to look at the ceiling, so it's a very important PR move that she's doing right now. We can praise her for that.
There's a kind of thing that if you look, it escapes me which direction it is, but if you look, I think to the right, you're telling the truth, and another thing, if you look, you're trying to recall something. It could be the other way around. Don't quote me on this, but you've got to look at the eye directions.
Right.
I need to brush up on my body language 101. And yeah, as you mentioned there, Lei Tingjie looking up to the ceiling, trying to recall something. And you mentioned Beth Harmon there. And one of the things about Beth Harmon is that they really played in that TV series that she was thinking in terms of visualization and just boards. And this is a kind of entirely different thinking to what I've usually done. Like, for instance, when I play chess, I'm thinking with words, I'm thinking with plans, I'm talking to myself at times. And when I asked some of the top players whether speaking different languages impacted on their style of play, and the move d3 has been played, and one of the grandmasters told me, in fact, they never ever thought with language at all. It was just simply a case of chess and the moves literally playing themselves out, like Beth Harmon did in the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, well, I think we've briefly already touched this topic like in the previous broadcast. I think it's very important to do sometimes what you're doing, to try to put in words, right, certain plans, ideas, like to highlight, because it like let you not make mistakes, avoid making certain mistakes, because like if you talk to yourself about like the importance of development in the opening, right, if you are confronted with an unknown, to you some theoretical line, but you say, okay, I don't know this line, but what do I need to do in the opening? I need to develop pieces, fight for the center castle, and it might help. Those small reminders might be very, very helpful, and that's why it's so important, because like lines, if you start diving, if you start counting like all those moves and lines and complicated variations, you might just get lost, and those words may actually guide you in those complications.
Yeah. And talking about lines and getting lost, we do see quite a few moves being played. The king has gotten itself to safety. The rook on f1 has been activated, so to speak, and there we see Lei Tingjie setting up this little center of c3, d3, and e4, and lots of plans on the board. Perhaps she wants to play d4, perhaps she wants to expand on the queen's side with b4, a4. That's a very trendy idea, and well, that idea of b4 has now been put to bed.
Exactly. Now, there are many small things happening. Like, for example, we saw Lei taking a deep, quite a long, relatively long think after knight f6. The reason behind that was, I checked very briefly, but it seems that Ju Wenjun always, played bishop c5 at her previous games. Knight f6 is something new, probably prepared for this championship, and it avoids certain lines with c3, d4. In the Italian. So Lei kind of contemplated for some time. She played d3. After that, like the game transposed to the Italian. So if she prepared at home this quiet Italian, nothing like new for her. And yeah, for the moment, we can say that black opted for this d6 a5 line. It's like already quite a big direction because there are other ways for black to meet the Italians. They can try to play a very aggressive and sharp d5 line, so castle on d5. After d6, white can opt for something connected with bishop g5, also quite a sharp line. And after c3, yeah, a5 is another step that kind of defining the situation and indicates the black's plan and black's ideas here, because a5 indeed, as you mentioned, stops at least b4, or kind of makes it harder to play b4 for white, but at the same time it weakens the b5 square quite a lot, and we might see white's bishop or white's knight get there to b5 for later on. And well, I expect to see a very interesting theoretical battle in this line.
I certainly do as well, and I was just checking out, because now Leiting J has taken a pause, and so I was going to check the openings and see how popular a5 is, and it is not the first choice by any means.
Well,
a6, as you mentioned, castles, bishop b6, but a5, just 185 games. When you consider that, like, this opening has been played thousands and thousands of times
for centuries,
exactly, has very, very strong pedigree. a5, I remember it being popular when I decided to play e4, e5, and this was around about 2008, because this was the kind of scheme that I hatched up, and no, I didn't hatch up. That's completely incorrect. I decided to adopt this approach as well, and the whole idea is that a5, as you kind of stop white from ceding space, but at the same time, you can drop the bishop to a7, which can be important. And now white has, I'm just taking a look at the opening database, white has many things that they can do. They can also play, just going to pull up the analysis board of a4, that is one plan, just to cement that b5 square, and still black's position has a lot of flexibility, lots of plans available to black. And another approach that white can take is if I go back instead of a4, and you can go knight bd2, which is very normal. I have to confess, rather than say, is that I've always struggled with this type of opening, because I feel that neither white nor black have too much space, and it's so many minor pieces on the board. Okay, and we see a different approach, just as I was going to say knight bd2, but I'm pretty sure that knight bd2 will make an impression, and still, again, very flexible. And let's go back to the game.
Bishop b3 is played. It's quite an interesting approach. I don't remember seeing this move very often, but I know that sometimes I do retreat the bishop to b3 just to prepare for bishop e6 to be able to retreat this bishop further away, either to a4 or to c2. But yeah, more like regular moves that we see in this position is definitely the ones that you mentioned: a4, knight b2, d2, rook e1, and only later on white starts moving this bishop. But again, it might all transpose to similar positions, and the fact that Lei is taking her time, even though I'm sure they prepared some plan against this a5 Italian, because you had already played this line before with a5. There are so many moves orders, move transitions, and like small details that you really feel like taking this time and kind of recalling everything and rechecking, because this Italian game theory expanded so much in the last quarter of a century, just because of the fact that because of the Berlin defense, actually, when the Berlin started to appear in every second game after e4, e5, I started to look for other ways around. And I remember when I was growing and somebody was playing the Italian, it just was considered to be a drawish line, and we were referring to this person who played the Italian that he or she just tries to make a draw, just play bishop c4, then rook e1, bishop e3, kind of exchange these bishops, and black do the same, or rook e8, bishop e6, and that's it. But now it's a different story. If somebody plays the Italian game, it doesn't mean they're trying to make a draw.
It certainly doesn't mean that at all. And what we're going to see instead is that, actually, I did see in the chat that Senorita was giving us a heads up that this line of bishop b3 has been recommended by Anish Giri in his chessable course.
Right.
And as far as I know, this chessable course is hot new information, and there we see castles. So Lei Ting-J, I wonder whether she scored Ju and Jun unawares, and there we see black castle. And what is Lei Ting-J going to follow up with? Is it going to be a4? I mean, she still has that flexibility where she can play anything. She can develop, she can go a4, she can also go knight d2 and wait for that decision to happen. She can also go for your rook e1, bishop e3 plan that you mentioned, and also I also wonder whether bishop g5 is going to be in the air. I always have a preference for securing squares, so I think I would go a4.
Right.
And get control over b5 and smile a little bit, but that's all I can do.
It's funny because I looked at the last games, I checked the last games of this move order, and I see who you find late in game for Women's Speed Chess Championship on chess.com back in 2021. So Lei actually plays this line with both colors now. So that just indicates that she might really, feel the ideas.
Well, yeah. Also, it didn't mean that she was uncomfortable, right? In the game with the black pieces. So definitely experience from both sides will help. And rook e1 on the board. And I always was really confused by this whole opening in general. But one of the things that confused me a lot was like this idea of rook e1. When to play it? Should you prepare it with h3? Should you just go immediately and then put your rook in e2 if the knight comes out to g4? And there was so many possibilities. And someone did give me a tip as to how you can assess the Italian games, because again, it's very, very tense. They said, look at the power of the bishops. And often this bishop on b3 will be a fantastic piece, maybe 15 moves down the line. After you've done all the maneuvers, after you've broken through the d4 or black has gone to d5, it will all hinge on the power of the knight squared bishop. And yeah, we will see what happens. Rook e1, what will black play? Will black play knight out to g4?
What the heck you do
h6?
Yeah, again, there are different ways and moves, I believe, for black here, including bishop a7 or bishop e6, or preparing it with rook e8. But yeah, you're right that when you play rook e1 or rook e8, you always, without including h3 or h6, you have to consider this knight g4, knight g5 option. And in general, as I understand it, it's better to avoid playing h3 or h6, but sometimes you just can't, because if you play rook e1 and there is a possibility of playing knight g4, the move that you should consider when making this move without this h3 inclusion. Sometimes it's kind of here, white already has to protect the pawn on f2. Of course, white doesn't want to get back to f1. Yeah, usually white plays rook e2. And here there are different moves like king h8, h3, even f5 ideas exist, but not in this position, because I don't think it works here. But still, I mean, there is a line that I play with black.
But you know, actually it exists in this position.
In this position as well, okay.
In this position, I'm seeing that it exists, that the computer does not love. After f5.
That's good. Then we should check it out. No, because it's a very nice idea, and I've tried it in my own games in a little bit like slightly different situation, but still, I mean, those ideas can be pretty unpleasant. And same can be said for like black if black uncarefully. I mean, plays rook e8 and knight g5 and f4 connected with f4 might happen. And,
just to kind of expand the whole idea of f5 is that after f takes g5, if the knight takes a careless point, g3 is coming in there. It's going to be backed up by queen h4, and there's just too much pressure on f2, which means that knight g5 is possible, but g3 is still incredibly dangerous for black. So that is the concrete idea behind playing f5. And let's go back to the board. And big decision, is she going to play knight g4? Is she going to play rook e8, as Alexandra highlighted?
Yeah, that's why basically white usually plays h3, you know, just to play it safe, just not to consider those knight g4 or even bishop g4 ideas, and then get back to rook e1, knight e2, knight f1, knight g3, even preparing d4 plan. And yeah, it's weird when, I mean, white plays the d3 in this quiet Italian, and same can be said about black. It doesn't mean they're not thinking about d4. They actually dream of making d4 at the right point, but just because of the fact that they didn't have a chance to play d4 in the opening, because of those concrete lines and variations, they played this quiet move, you know, protected this pawn on e4 for the moment, but still they want, I mean, now to regroup the pieces, to protect this e4 square, and then at the end, like, play the d4 breaks over. So that's basically the plan for both colors. For white, for black, they're similar.
Yeah, they are very similar. Yeah, completely. I mean, it's very risky for white to play d4 because, as you highlighted, white can't maintain the tension in the center for too long because it just gets chipped away. The bishop will come out to g4, and at some point, white will have to either take on e5, which isn't ideal if you're not ready for it, or go d5, which again isn't that great. So that's why white, as Alexandra highlighted, moves that knight all the way to g3, and then, and this is, I remember on my very first trainer. I had my very first trainer at the age of 27.
Oh, wow.
He was really good.
Well, better late than never, right?
Right, and then he used to say to me, it's all about catching black on the wrong foot. And I always like that expression, you know, you are playing for d4 every single opportunity, but you've got to do it when black isn't ready for it or is least expecting it. So we'll see. And Du Wenjun, whereas with Lei Ting-Jie, we've seen something very concrete from her. Where she can take the most forcing route, she will. So if I were Lei Ting-Jie to play right now, I would expect knight g4, I would expect f5, and I would expect fireworks.
We're not really good in
No.
predicting their moves, while here, well, every single one we've discussed before.
We have discussed this before. And, well, c5 is a committal move because, after all, it does make this bishop on a7, as we've highlighted. Let me just get rid of that arrow. It makes this bishop on a7 bad, and at the same time, it gives black a black backward d pawn. And, of course, backward pawns have targets on their back. So white's dream is simply to exchange a few pieces and then just start controlling the square in front of this backward pawn. That's the d5 square. And then once you do that, you just simply pile up and attack it. That was a prescription that was advocated by Nimzovich moons and moons ago. And what Ji Wenjun, she has to take active measures. And we were looking at moves like bishop c6 in order to try, after knight takes knight, bishop c6, try to get d5. It's also possible that she could she even think about going b5? I mean, that's a very maximalist move. I see that being suggested by the computer. I don't think I would play b5.
Yeah, it looks very, very dangerous, but it does, I mean, take on to control the c4 square. And still, I mean, when you play b5, you kind of expect white to play a4 at some point, right? And because this pawn on b5 is so easily can get under attack, because the a5 and c5 pawns are already gone also forward, and you start wondering whether you really need this kind of move to happen. Because, okay, if you capture on a4 or play before, same knight takes c5, knight c4 possibilities are in there, and white can try them on.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Maybe you shouldn't allow a4 and then go all alpha 0. So if you go not b5, but instead a4.
Yes.
But really, I mean, this is
interesting.
sophisticated chess, because, I mean,
Right.
who can, with a good conscience, ignore the bad possibilities of d6? I'm not sure about playing a4. I think.
But what happens if
What do
I
we
capture on e5 and play knight c4 anyway? Because basically, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure whether capturing on e4 after a4, yes, whether it's really like a good plan for white, because I improve black's structure, it seems, right, by capturing it. The pawn from d6 goes away, and
still, there's also this kind of issue as well. So no.
Wait, queen c7.
Wait, hang on,
I mean, bishop a4, there's always b5. So queen c7.
Yeah, queen c7. Yes, and also the pawn on e4 is hanging. So queen c7.
And that's what I was saying. It's not so clear to me whether white actually gained a lot because of this capture on e5. And
yeah, and going. So I agree with that, because b5 is actually coming next, and white doesn't have a serious home for this knight. Knight need posts. They need a anchored square. So, for instance, d5 is an anchored square because it's protected by the pawn on e4. Definitely.
I can play knight d6, but it just seems so slow, and it doesn't seem.
Yeah, I feel like rook comes to d8. One rook.
Exactly. That's why I was thinking about actually playing queen to d6, but it felt. I mean, I thought that I just, instead of knight d6, queen to d6, with the idea that if black captures, then I capture with a knight and I attack the pawn on b7, but I don't really understand, bishop to c6. Does white still have any advantage left, or I kind of exchanged everything away?
Well, you're allowed c4 though, right?
c4, yes, that's exactly the move that I consider now.
Yeah, so I was thinking, instead of bishop c6, maybe you can go b5, just to...
Yes, fair enough.
Grab space.
Yes. Maybe, and if I play c4 anyway?
Yeah.
It always double-edged, though, because I, also give away the d4 square, but your knight is still quite free from it. Black has to play b4, no?
Yeah, it has to play b4. And a3 pawn chain is coming your way. I don't know who this benefits, to be honest with you. I like black's position just because I feel like a pawn on a3 is going to be very scary.
Right.
But then again, there's swings and roundabouts, as we say in the UK. The bishop on a7 is defending a c5 pawn. It's not great. And it's just going to be about who can maneuver their knight into the center in a more powerful way. So that one is very double-edged. So maybe the solution is not, as you've indicated, to capture on e5. Maybe the solution is... And
what is
this,
it?
unfortunately, fails to this. And black steals the b2 pawn, right?
Yeah, very far away. But wait, can't we just take on e5 first? Did you play?
Okay, you want to take?
And then take on...
Yeah. And then
take on e4. Why didn't I consider just taking?
Yeah.
I don't know. I often don't consider simple moves, so that's my job.
Yeah, this is very simple. This looks also quite good. I just wondered, where is... I'm just pawned out.
So maybe a4 is too brave after all, right?
A4 is too brave. A2 just loses material. So yeah, that's is not going to happen. So knight f no. So let's go back to the position. Knight 4 to f3. Ooh,
what to do?
Decision time for Ji Wenjun. And She's burning her time. She's now down to 47 minutes and we're just 15 moves into the game. And just to remind everyone of the time control, the players did get 90 minutes to make 40 moves. And then once they've passed their move 40, they do get this bonus time of 30 minutes. And remember, they also get bonus time from move 1 of 30 seconds per move.
Right.
So not quite serious time pressure, but you feel like, considering we're just out of the opening and the critical stage is yet to come, then Ji Wenjun has to make a decision quickly.
Yeah, half of the time is gone already. And 25 moves are still to go. And well, we expect that the middle game would be a more complicated part than the opening, right? Somehow I always get this feeling because we have some opening preparation. We spend so much time nowadays analyzing openings, while middle games are so much more complicated. But for some reason, it's not always the case. Sometimes mistakes or inaccuracies that you make in the opening kind of so costly that middle games are too late to think about already at this point.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, generally speaking, usually there are 3 stages of a chess game, and each of them shall not be easier to play than the previous one. So.
And there we see bishop c6 played. This was, according to our feeling, the most natural move, just to put the pressure on the e4 point. And I think it's just irresistible, right? You want to break out with a d5. You want to be able to get rid of your weaknesses. Bishop c6. And there, I always just look at the evaluation bar. And the evaluation bar is like creeping up in white's favor. So what can white play?
Just knight takes e5 and a4, the moves that we discussed, kind of.
As easy as that.
Well,
Yes,
stopping a4. I mean, not knight c4, but a4 first. Maybe knight c4, by the way, is great as well. But I was just, too lazy to calculate all those knight e4, bishop e4 moves.
I agree. You got to be practical. This is where you save minutes on your clock and
exactly.
You just go
a4.
a4, and you have this square on b5, and one of my friends, he went up from being a 2100 all the way to being a 2350, and he did it within the space of a year. Wow. And we asked him, like, how did this happen? Because it wasn't like he was young either. I mean, and he had a job and everything. And he said, well, actually, he started looking after his squares. So he treated squares like money. And so he would say, well, I'm going to be careful about conceding control. In this case, the b5 square. So by looking after those things, and we're going to. Yeah. Well, Alexandra. Looks like our prediction game is on point, and now we're expecting. I should just refresh to the game continuation.
Yes, to rephrase a very famous phrase out of the Russian literature classics, that good moves. It's so easy to make good moves,
And I like also how Yasser does it. So Yasser, after the players have predicted their moves, he goes, yeah, these guys are good.
Exactly. You see how strong we are. And yes, the players kind of agree with the commentators. Nice job, players. I'm very proud of you. Yes.
Yeah. And okay, a4, securing control of the b5 square, very natural move. We also touched upon knight c4, but then we weren't sure about bishop takes e4.
I was too lazy. Yeah, you were proposing. You were,
but that was only because I forgot. I completely forgot about the pawn on e4 being on pre. But having said all that, Lei Ting-Jie has a very direct, aggressive style, and she will be gearing her mind towards knight c4 and bishop takes e4.
We can have a look, right?
Let's take a deep dive into the mind of Lei Ting-Jie. So a4, natural, good, nothing wrong.
Yeah, but
knight c4.
The only thing, bishop
takes e4. So this is the only thing.
Of course, white is not really losing this pawn, right? Because she always can take on h6, like bishop takes e4, knight takes e4. She can take on e5. There are many pawns that hanging, so it's not really a sacrifice, but rather a possibility, an exchange that might not be possible. I mean, you don't have to. Again, the position seems to offer this choice, and you can make this choice, just simply out of those pragmatic feelings that you just don't want to let extra possibilities to your opponent.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't feel that's inspired by moves like knight takes e5. I feel like that's a bit too helpful. And I'm more, like in this type of position, I would be like drawn to playing a4. But I'm a pawn down, and that stresses me out. So I agree.
I mean, you can always take on h6, bishop takes h6, and a4 is played. A4 plays. But it's so, again, easy moves that look so natural and good. Why to start even calculating something else?
Exactly. And also, you save time on the clock, and the clock will become very important in the next few moves, because it's still Ji Wenjun has not equalized yet. Queen e7, because her bishop, and the reason why she hasn't equalized is because her bishop on a7 is just bad, and she has conceded control over the b5 square. So these are things that give Lei Ting-Jie a small advantage, and Lei Ting-Jie has the flexibility. And now my move is, because I really want to play knight c4, is queen f3, and I want to connect the rooks. Queen f3,
yes.
Overprotect e4. Maybe you also set up some tactical tricks like bishop takes h6. They don't work right now, but if the queen is on f3, can be a problem because knight f6 is loose. Ooh, so interesting moment. What is Lei Ting going to play?
Queen E2.
Queen e2.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So what's
This
her
is the
plan?
first time I haven't guessed the move. Queen e2.
Yes.
What's the plan?
Why Queen E2 and not Queen F3? Because the plan was putting the knight on C4, probably heading somewhere to F5. Seemed so, tempting. Now, actually, the player's blitzing out the moves. Queen E2, Rook F2, D8, and we'll see what White has in mind. Because she didn't protect the pawn on E4 at least directly. Of course, she always can play knight C4 and having this bishop takes H6 ideas in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
What else can she do?
It's... Yeah. Oh, Queen E2. Is it just to get F3? F3 and Queen.
You want to move this knight away from D2, right?
I really do. I mean, there's an open D line, and I'm just itching to set up a chat.
Position is White has some advantage because